should start now?
I think we should. We've got 29, 30 people on, so I think we could probably just start if Butch and Cliff Stockdale are amenable to it.
Yep. Ready on this end.
Yep.
Cliff,
Go ahead. All set.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'll start the meeting. My name is Dave Hull. I've just a few brief comments. I welcome everybody to the first competition meeting, for this year. This great attendance. So I welcome all of you and appreciate your attendance tonight. Carl, the webmaster, typically sends me a list or sends, the host a list or a list of potential guests. I noticed that Michael Williams, I think Michael joined us last week, but I would encourage Michael to say, anything about, himself and what he's really wanting, to gain from a photo club like Focus. And then if there's other people after Michael, I'll check to see if anybody else has joined us as guests. But I welcome anybody, in the audience saying anything about if they have questions or comments. And then we'll kind of get into the, then I'll introduce Oz. So Michael, the soapbox is yours, sir.
Sure, and thank you for offering it to me. Yes, I am kind of evaluating you guys right now. I did attend the last meeting, which was very enjoyable, very fascinating presentation in that session, and I'm very interested to see how you guys can do photo competitions, and of course to see what works you have to present tonight and a judge. As for me personally, I've been kind of an on-again, off-again amateur photographer over the last decade or so. And it's kind of funny because I had kind of gotten away from it in the last couple of years, but then COVID happened and lots of things weren't happening as a result. But one thing that I could do or continue doing is go hiking and doing nature photography. And so that kind of got me back into the fold of thinking and shooting, and kind of got me thinking about, well, why not, reach out to the photographer community in Colorado, and specifically Front Range. I live just north of Denver. And I did a little research. You guys came up on kind of the top of the list, and so here I am, and very much looking forward to tonight. And I imagine that I will join, do a membership with you guys, and very much looking forward to that.
excellent.
Michael, thank you very much. Great, appreciate you joining us. And if you have any questions or whatever further, encourage you to get in contact, through the web, and somebody will be back, in contact with you. So I'll keep my fingers crossed that you join us. We'd love to see that. There's another gentleman that Carl mentioned, Rick Carter. So I would encourage Rick to say a little bit about himself and what he's looking for in a photo club.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I am very much interested in joining the club. Looking forward to tonight's. I was in last week for the Eastern Colorado tour, and it was very informative. Made me want to go. Post-COVID, of course. I moved to Denver 1 year ago in January, and I lived in Phoenix for 40 years. I've been taking pictures a long time. I was an engineer. I retired about 6 years ago at Honeywell, and looking forward to taking more pictures in Colorado and and everywhere once I start traveling again. Look forward to traveling, and the club looks very interesting. I've read the couple of the pages and downloaded the list of the competition. I'm really looking forward to participating.
Well, Rick, thank you very much. Like I said to Michael, I hope that you do join us. And if you have any questions or whatever, please reach out to us.
Will do.
As we move forward, I would appreciate if people would kind of mute themselves. I think that's gonna, it sometimes causes interference because with somebody getting a talk or a dog barking in the background, you come up on screen. So I would appreciate that. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Oz, and I think Oz has some updates and remarks for us. So the soapbox is yours, Oz.
Yeah, so my name is Oz Fendinger, for those who are new to the club, and I'm the president this year. So I need to announce a change that we're making in regards to moving up from the F5.6 group to the F8 group. When you move up from one group to the other, generally what we've been using
He froze.
Oz, this is Dave. I don't know whether you froze or I froze or what's going on.
I think Oz froze. Yeah.
Yeah, he froze.
Maybe we'll kind of segue, Oz back in. So I'll a little bit. So at this point, we'll put Oz on pause and we'll go on to Carl. I think Carl has some comments about what he's got planned. Oz, are you back with us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. My microphone seems okay and the camera's on.
Yep. Well,
So you can hear me again?
we can hear you and see you again. So
Okay. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so we're going to use 8.2 for the F5.6 group to advance. And the reason for that is that people in the F5.6 group, if they can get an average of 8.6 in the past, then they could have advanced all the way up to F16. And that takes quite a while to do. I mean, to get to that level of competence. So we're going to go to 8.2, and that way people can move up to the F8 group more easily and be rewarded. So that's why we're doing it, just to encourage the F5.6 group. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
What are we gonna do for dinner?
So can you hear me, Dave?
I can hear you. Somebody asked a question, but I didn't pick up on the question. So please repeat it.
I didn't have a question. I just wondered if I wanted to pass it over to you now.
Okay, I thought somebody had a question for you.
Oh,
Dave, as far as I know, it sounded like somebody asking in the background what they're going to have for dinner.
Oh, well, we'll ignore that and move on. So, yeah. So I guess, Carl, you want to, let us know about some of the mentor meetings that are oncoming.
Sure. But before I start, I do want to give Steve Wilton a chance to pop in here and take a minute. He's one of our other guests. Steve, if you want to unmute yourself and say a few words.
Hi, yeah, I'm a newbie, and like Michael had mentioned, I also live north of Denver, and because of COVID, I got back into my hobby again, which had been dormant for too many decades, in my case. So it's been a lot of fun resurrecting the old photography hobby. Bought a new camera and a new iPhone, and going at it here for the last 6 months. So I look forward to what the club has to offer. I think it's really great from what I looked at on the website. So I'm just here to observe and learn.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So as Dave mentioned, yes, mentor meetings, what in the past we would call the critique meetings. Now, since we're doing them on Zoom instead of doing them in person, what we're hoping to do and what I plan to do is have people send images in through the normal form, through the digital submission form. On the website, the form does have a spot to tag it as a critique image. I think I will probably also have people put in a comment that it's for the mentoring session meeting at the end of the month. I'll send an email out to all the members, a few weeks before the actual meeting. But as we discuss the images, as people go through them, I'm planning on, if I can do this real quick. What I'm planning on is, as people, as we start discussing images, I'll pull them up in Lightroom. As people are saying, well, okay, I think we should crop this. I think we should do that. I will be doing those things as people are talking about them to just to show, because when you're critiquing an image, when you're talking about an image, it's nice to see the differences, to see, what an exposure change might do, to see what, changing highlights and shadows will do, to see what moving it to black and white will do, and hopefully get to a point where, we have a nice image. And of course, this one I actually did in black and white too. So by doing this, we can, I think, have a little bit better mentoring session. I was thinking about this today, and I'm not sure if we'll, do groups of images or something, or how we'll run it exactly, but that'll all get worked out. But the whole idea is to have, me making some quick edits, quick changes in Lightroom as people are talking about and discussing images, so that the maker gets a much better idea of, this is what it would look like if it was, say, a square crop, or if it turned to black and white or something like that. Visualizing is going to be easier for people to learn and to understand. So I'm hoping that, that makes our Zoom mentoring sessions much more valuable to everybody.
And how often do these mentoring sessions occur?
We do them on the 5th Wednesday of the month, and so this year there are 3 of them.
Gotcha.
They are only, it's March, June, and September, if I remember. Yeah, March, June, and September. And these are listed on the website too.
Got it.
So that, you can consider it one of the benefits of membership. This is not the kind of meeting that will be open to people, for guests, to request a Zoom link for it or something like that. This is just us talking amongst ourselves.
Got it. Well, that's excellent. That's actually one of the major attractions to this group, being able to get that kind of feedback and give and receive that kind of feedback.
Awesome, great. Anybody have any questions?
No, but I was going to say, I really like the idea of doing it in Lightroom, so you can actually see the changes, the slight changes.
Right. I really think that'll be beneficial. Obviously, I'm not going to take the time to go into Photoshop and spend 20 minutes doing an image, but at least doing some quick edits and stuff like that, we can get a better idea of what those images look like. Rick, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did. What is the format that you submit photos? Do you take them as a JPEG, or do you get like something in Lightroom you can see the edits already?
Since the main idea of the mentoring sessions, or the critique sessions as they were, when we actually met in person, people would bring in like an iPad or a laptop or something to show their digital images, or they bring in prints. So obviously a print is a finished image, it's done. So, this isn't necessarily, I took this picture and I don't know what to do with it, although we will accept images like that. But potentially this would be, I did this thing, and I kind of like it, but I think there's more to it.
Right.
Can you give me some suggestions and help me out, and what would make this better, what would improve it? And that's the kind of thing that we're kind of aiming for.
Okay. So it's a JPEG image that we would submit.
Most likely it'll be a JPEG. Again, when I was thinking about it today, I was like, man, do I want to get raw files? But I don't think I want to do that. I think using JPEGs is going to be quick and simple. And again, these are most of the time they are not necessarily finished images, but mostly finished.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, Carl, thank you very much for spearheading this project. I think it's a step in the right direction. And I know that probably in early May or mid-May, or in March, you'll be sending out some more information on what people would submit. So
Yes, I will. Yep.
thank you very much. I'm going to basically talk a little bit about the upcoming program on February 10th. Sean Slade is the program chair. He's traveling on business, so he's probably on an airplane as we speak. So I told him that I would do this. So basically on February the 10th, we're going to have a gentleman that's Denver-based by the name of Tom Cooper. And Tom actually documented the East Troublesome Fire, which was the second largest fire in Colorado history at just a little bit under 194,000 acres. So he basically drove to Grand Lake, or Grand County, I'm sorry, as the fire was blowing up. And he spent 2 days, you know, in what looked like hell on earth, capturing everything that he saw. So he slept when he could, but for the most part, he didn't stop taking photographs for those 2 days, and he took over 4,000 images. I doubt if he's going to show us, you know, more than 50, 60, but I think it's going to be fascinating to get his viewpoint of what it was like documenting this fire. And I don't know much more about it. Sean Slade actually lined him up, so I'm looking forward to this. This will be fascinating. So I would encourage everybody to check back in on February the 10th. And I will finally turn this over to Butch and Cliff, who are the co-chairs for our competition. And I'll let them introduce Phil and go on. I'll mute myself and stop my video, and please take it over, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we
Yes?
can.
Okay.
You're good, Butch.
All right. Tonight's competition is in the open category. Open allows the photographer to submit images on any subject matter. The members are encouraged to explore photographic techniques and subjects outside their usual style. And this evening's judge is Phil Witt. Phil and I met in Botswana on a photo safari 9 years ago, and fortunately, we've remained in contact ever since. Phil has been photographing nature since he got his first SLR camera in the 70s. He's an avid birder. He's a volunteer at the Scherman Hoffman Wildlife Sanctuary of the New Jersey Audubon in Bernardsville, New Jersey, where he co-leads photography workshop series and is currently on the New Jersey Audubon's board of directors. He is past president of the Camera Naturalist Photo Club, New Jersey's only nature-only photography club. He judges photography competitions and presents instructional programs at photography clubs throughout the state. He received the New Jersey Federation of Camera Club 2017 citation for service to photography in the state. He and his wife, Becky, by the way, will judge our April competition. They enjoy traveling the world for photography, Antarctica, Galapagos, Tanzania, Iceland, Costa Rica, among others. When not birding or taking pictures, Phil is a forensic psychologist specializing in legal cases and court testimony. So Phil, I wanted to ask you, did you have anything that you wanted to add to what I just went over?
That sounds like me.
All right.
I think the only thing I'd add is to give you some idea of how I approach my judging. I can tell you that I've never judged where I haven't felt afterwards I could have done something better. And quite frankly, I've never taken a picture or developed a picture where I felt I couldn't have done something better afterwards. So I don't doubt that I won't do a perfect job in this case, but I'll do the best I can. And I try and look at three basic things: impact or interest, technique, and composition. And of course, those three are related. If you have really lousy technique and lousy composition, it's likely to affect the interest and impact. So those are the three factors I try and look at. I'll try and be objective when I judge your images. I'll try not to be perfectionistic, because sometimes I've seen judges in the very slightest flaw, and you can always find some flaw, they will knock an image down, and I'll try and be reasonable about things. So that's my approach to judging, and that's pretty much all I have to say.
Good enough. Thank you, Phil. And just for everybody's edification, this evening we have 49 images. We have 8 in the F5.6 category. We only have 2 in the F8s. We have 14 for the F11s. And as usual, we have our most, we have 25 in F16. And as has become the practice, we're going to begin each category with the black and white images, followed by the colored images, the color images. After each category, those with a score of 10 can say a few words about the image, any special techniques they used, or other information that might be helpful to the membership. If there's nothing else, Bob, are you ready to go?
Ready. Ready to go.
Okay, so our first image is, it's a black and white switchback.
Okay, give me 1 second. I want to set up my annotation tools. Gee, I don't see it. Up above?
Well, this is Dave Hull. We haven't been very successful to use the annotation tools in Zoom, so.
Oh, that's too bad.
Maybe you know a few tricks that we don't.
I usually rely on them, but I don't see them here when I click view options.
I guess they're not available.
They're apparently not available. Okay, I'll have to do without them. Switchback. Okay, a really nice sinuous line of the road. I think that it leads the eye, my eye, right through the picture. I think it could be improved a little bit by bringing out a little more detail in that very deep black area in shadow. I would like to see just a little more detail. Right now, it's almost solid black with hardly anything visible there. And it would be more interesting to me, at least, if I were able to see some detail there. And also, you know, the eye tends to go toward the brightest area of an image, and the brightest area here is that white sand down in the lower left-hand corner. I would probably tone that down, and I would probably brighten up the dark area in the middle. But certainly for the 5.6 group, I think a very nice attempt, a good eye, a creative attempt. I'll give it an 8.
Hey, our next image is another black and white. It is thank you.
Very nice geometry. I think the photographer, again, captured something that engages my eye. It has some interest. I love the lines that the maker created of the tombstones. It's certainly an evocative image. And the only thing I might suggest is to be careful. Let me just move this out of the way so I can see the entire image. I think one thing you need to do is what I call border patrol. And that is to look around the edges of an image. And at the very bottom of the image, you have just the top of a gravestone. And I find that a little distracting. I would probably, if you could, maybe get a little higher up to shoot over it, or if you're comfortable with it, in post-processing, to use a little content-aware fill to simply get rid of it. But other than that, another engaging image. I'll give that an 8 also.
Thank you, Phil. Our next image, again, a black and white, is, I think I'm pronouncing it properly, Bucalia.
I like the view up the hill, and I like the framing by the 2 trees. I'm assuming, my first thought, by the way, was that this was another shot of the cemetery and that those were gravestones. But as I look at it more closely, it appears to be a skyline in the distance, a city skyline. I think the skyline, which is really the subject of the image, is just too small. It occupies 2 or 3% of the image. And if I were shooting it, to give it more impact, I might I might use a zoom lens to zoom in on just that aspect. You could still get the trees framing it, but I really think that the city is just too small in the distance to really give it the impact and interest that I assume was your goal. I'll give this an 8 as well.
And our next image is storm rising.
Well, the sky certainly has some drama. I love the movement in the clouds. It looks like the tail end of a thunderstorm. I think it could be improved by bringing out a little more detail in the land. It's just solid black, and I would like to see a little more detail, a little more interest over on the lower right. You clearly have some trees, but it's mostly just a black blob. And if I could see some detail in it, it would have a little more impact for me. But overall, I think, especially for the 5.6 class, the sky is really dramatic. I'm not 100% sure that the colors are natural. It looks a little bluish. Certainly in shadow, you get a bluish tint, but this might be a little overdone. But it's so powerful and has so much impact. I'm going to give this one a 9.
Our next image is Colorado Rattler.
I love the tongue out. The face is pretty sharp. I might pick a nit here or there. As we go back a little bit, it looks like it's falling off just a touch. You might have wanted to use a smaller f-stop, maybe F16, to get a little more depth of field. I think these are very difficult shots to get for a number of reasons, but one of the main difficulties that you can see in this shot is the coil on the right-hand side of the image is very much in the foreground, and it's very much out of focus. It's really one of the brightest areas, and unfortunately the softest area in the foreground. I think perhaps if you were to move over to the left a little bit and shoot it at an angle where that wasn't protruding so much, it would have been a stronger image. But it's certainly a dramatic image. I'll give this an 8.
Our next image is posies.
Well, there are two aspects of this. One is just the composition itself, and the other is the very intense post-processing. I'm assuming that the maker did this post-processing intentionally. It's so over the top that it's hard for me to imagine that it's unintentional. So I'll give the maker credit for attempting something interesting here. I like the composition. I like how these two individuals are surrounded by all of these flowers. It's got some interest. It's got some impact. The post-processing itself, to me, is not that appealing, but that's a matter of personal taste. I'm not going to knock the maker for that, because this was clearly the maker's intent. I might have cut down on the sky a little bit. The sky really holds very little interest. I probably would have cropped down a little bit, because really the main focus of your interest is the two people surrounded by all of these flowers. But that's a fairly trivial criticism. It might have been an improvement in my eyes, but fairly trivial. I'll give this one a 9 for the powerful impact that it has.
Thank you, Phil. Our next image is Buffalo Bath.
Dust baths are always challenging, because they, on the one hand, they're dramatic. On the other hand, they veil the animal, so you really don't have a clear view of the animal. I might have attempted to bring out a little more contrast in the animal despite the dust bath, perhaps using something like clarity or texture in Lightroom or the same in Adobe Camera Raw. And as far as composition, I think it could have been improved by pointing your camera up just a little bit. You know, you don't want to really clip just the tip of his horn. If you're going to shoot the animal, you know, you try and get all the important parts in. And in this case, obviously, with a buffalo, a bison, one important part is his horns. So I'll give this one an 8.
Okay, our last image in the F5.6 group is win mega, buy ice cream, and clean up afterwards.
Well, if you win the mega, you can probably pay somebody to clean up afterwards. Again, you know, there's very intense post-processing in this, and I think it might be equally interesting without all this fairly over-the-top post-processing. But, you know, the maker did it intentionally, and the fact that I may find it more appealing otherwise is neither here nor there. I'll try and put that aside. I think the composition itself is an appealing one. I like the geometry. I like kind of the rectangles of the signs in the window. I like the rectangles and the circular composition in the background. I find the geometry of it very appealing, and you know, it engages my eye, it engages my brain, and I even think the reflection of the trees in the window adds a little more interest to it. I'm going to give this one a 10.
And that, thank you, Phil. And that is it for our F5.6s. We had 110, our last image, win mega, buy ice cream, and clean up afterwards, by Terry Hanford. So is Terry available to make any comments?
Sure. This was a shot in South Boston. My daughter tells me that the store is now closed, so I'm glad that I got to capture it before that. I was just taken with the old-time sign of ice cream and cleaning supplies and the lottery there. I worked a lot on trying to tone back the colors and all the detail in the background so that the signs on the window would really stand out, which was challenging for me because I really like to get into the pixels, obviously. Thanks for your comments.
My pleasure. Nice shot.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Okay, so now we're going to move along to the F8s. We have 2, and our first is a black and white image, organized chaos.
I like the geometry of it. I like the contrast between the vertical lines of, excuse me, the vertical lines of the ropes and the coils of the ropes at the bottom, and the intersecting lines of the wood in the deck. I think that's very nice. I think the maker handled the exposure very well. You know, the light looks fairly flat. I'm assuming it was an overcast day. But you have a nice range of tones. You have, it looks like from whites to blacks, a good range of tones. I might have toned down the really bright area in the upper right-hand corner, in that corner. Again, your eye goes to the brightest area. You don't want my eye drawn all the way up there into the corner. You want it staying down on these ropes that are really the subject of it. But that is really a trivial point. I do think it could be improved in that regard, but other than that, I think it's very well handled, and I'll give this one a 10.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'll give it a 10.
A 10? Okay.
Our next image is reflections and tweed.
Very creative. I love the contrast between the jackets in the background and the buildings reflected from across the street. The only thing that I think might improve it is, again, to be consistent, remember that your eye tends to go toward the brightest area. And as I do my border patrol, as I look around the borders of this image, what do I see? I see in the upper right that really bright blue that attracts my eye to the edge of the picture, which really, again, is not what you want. So just to be consistent, I think I should point that out. I think that could easily be toned down in post-processing and perhaps even a little bit of a very subtle vignette put on the image to keep my eye in the center on those three jackets. I might have pointed my camera down just a little bit so that I wasn't cutting off the bottoms of it looks like a fishing basket and the purse that are in the foreground. It's a very nice image. I think it's very creative. Based on those flaws, though, I'm going to give this a 9.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Well, that does it for the F8s. We had 110 for organized chaos. And I hope I pronounced this right. El Shinogo.
That's good. I took this in San Diego a few years ago. This is on the ship that is used in the movie Master and Commander. And I saw this angle and I thought, I got to get this. And, you know, I thank you for the comment. I was more worried about the lower left corner chopping off that little bit of the post. But it was just something I just liked the composition. I liked the chaos of it in a controlled manner.
Yeah. You know, I noticed that the post was cut, but because that's dark, my eye doesn't focus on it. The upper right-hand corner, though, I simply noticed that more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving right along, we're going to head on to the F11s. So let's begin with rocks on end.
Well, it's certainly a dramatic scene. Whoops, we lost it. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll judge this one then. Black and whites first, that's right. As a brief aside, in the very first competition I judged locally, I was looking at black and white prints and I was judging them and I had the microphone in my hand because that club, it was in person, had a microphone to broadcast it over a speaker to the club. And after 3 or 4 black and white images, I said, boy, this club really likes monochrome images. And Becky, my wife, leaned over and whispered to me, Phil, it's a black and white competition. So they had me back, though. Okay, rocks on end, back to the competition. Again, the geometry is very nice. These rocks all pointed toward the upper right, give it some dynamism. It's a very high contrast image. I'm going to assume that the maker did that intentionally. I happen to not find it that appealing. I think that to do some really unusual post-processing, you really need a good reason to do that. And I think this probably would have looked just as good, if not better, in a more natural tonal range. But still, I think the maker was creative. I think the maker captured some very interesting geometry. I'll give this one a 9.
Our next image, also black and white, is Entrada.
This image is appealing. You know, with the door half open, or at least the right side of the door open and the left side closed, it engages me. You know, it makes me wonder what's happening in there. You know, what is behind that open door? What would I see if I walked through? I think it's framed nicely. I think that it is at least a half stop, though, if not a full stop, underexposed. I think this could easily be brought up. It just looks too dim, too dark. So based on that, which is a fairly major problem, I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay, our next image is another black and white. It is Brotherly Love.
Wonderful story. I think the composition is good. You know, when I see an image like this, the first thing I look for is, you know, what's the impact, what's the story, what's the narrative, and it's great. Second thing I look for is composition. And I followed the cat in the foreground, the lion cub in the foreground to the end, just to make sure that the maker did not cut off the tail. And I'm happy to see that all the tail is there. You know, these are the kind of things judges do automatically. I do think that the image is flat, though. I think you could get much more contrast in it. I look and it's just all kind of gray. I don't really see any whites. I don't see any blacks. So I would try and get a little more dynamic range. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Okay, our next image, also a black and white, is Sprague Lake Trifecta.
You know, they say that you should enter competitions with things in odd numbers, and I don't necessarily think that's true for every case, but you'll hear judges say that again and again. And certainly the maker has 3 prominent mountains here. I think the image is well captured as far as tonal range. You have some white whites, but none of the whites are blown out. I can see detail in all the whites. I can see detail in the shadows, and yet the shadow areas go almost to black. The only suggestion I have, and this is a matter of personal taste, I'm going to give this one a 10 regardless, is I think it could be cropped down just a little bit. I don't know that the sky above the mountains, the clouds right by the mountains blowing off from right to left are very dramatic, but the clouds above the mountains, the sky above it, I don't see as all that dramatic and adding to the image that much. And I would have cropped it down a bit, but I'm giving it a 10 regardless. It's a beautiful image.
Thanks, Bill. Our next image is Line of Geese.
I like the different layers that the maker has in this image. You know, the all horizontal layers, the brown ground at the bottom, the scrubby trees, then the hills, then the mountains, then the clouds, then the geese, then a little bit of blue above it. I really love the way the geometry of that is placed. A few very trivial things I might have cleaned up the lower area a little bit. You have some fallen over trees in the middle and in, toward the left a little bit that I think clutter up the bottom. And again, you know, I don't know what your rules are about post-processing and getting rid of stuff like that. In New Jersey, the general rule is if the judge can't see the post-processing, it's okay. So if you're good enough in post-processing to get rid of that kind of stuff, I would get rid of it. For my image, I would, because it would even highlight the beautiful geometry of this even more. But that's a very picky point, and I'm giving this one a 10 because other than that, it's beautifully captured.
Okay, Our next image is sunset over the Badlands.
Very dramatic. I love the way the rising thunderstorm echoes the shape of the hill on the left. I think that it's nicely captured. It engages me. It makes me, kind of look at the image and imagine. It's evocative. It evokes that landscape and that scene very well. I might have brightened up the hill on the left. I know that the hill is in shadow, and you don't want to get rid of all the shadow. You want it to look natural, but I think it could have been brightened up just a little bit. The shadow area of it. You have that very large shadow area dominating 25% of the image. So I might have brightened that up just a tad. But other than that, I think it is well captured. Is there a little bit of a funny color cast to the sky? Perhaps, but I'm giving this one a 9.
Our next image is Sunrise Peak, Saguaro.
No, that was removed.
Oh, that was removed?
No, that's a duplicate. That's why we sent you the PDF.
Okay. Cherry Creek?
Yes.
Okay, our next one is Cherry Creek.
Okay, thank you. I like the curve, the kind of C curve of the stream going from, as I view it, from left to right. I think, though, that this image has a couple of problems. I'm looking for a real clear subject, and something that I can rest my eye on. I suppose the creek is one, but it's not the brightest area. And in fact, I have to say that the brightest area is something you really don't want in the picture at all, and that's the sky, which really detracts from the image, and you have a significant, triangle of sky in the upper left. I would certainly have cropped just about all of that out. I probably would have cropped it down to just above the line of rocks. The trees, I don't think, add much, and certainly that sky not only doesn't add anything, but it detracts. And I just don't know that foreground is that interesting either. I'm trying to think if this image has really impact to me, and it's lacking. I'm going to give this an 8.
Our next image is Stockyard Melancholy.
Yeah, you have to feel for those animals. You know what's next. I like this shot a lot. It's got interesting lines with the line in the left and the animals being led away down that pathway. The line on the right diagonal to it with the people walking and the one animal being led down that pathway with all those interesting pens. The snow adds a lot of drama to it. And, normally, you know me by now, so normally I would say, well, do you need all that sky? It's just white. But here I think it works. I think it works because it conveys more of the scene of, a heavy snowfall. So I'm giving this one a 10. I like this image very much.
Our next image is Stars of the Pond.
It's a very nice composition. I like the placement of the flowers and the petals. Now we're getting up in class here, so I'm going to expect a little more. If you're going to compose a picture like this and you're going to submit it in a competition, do your border patrol. And as I look around the edges, as the borders, what do I see on the left-hand side? You clip that poor leaf. There was no reason to do that. You could have easily stepped back a foot and widened your view and got that leaf in, or just moved your camera a touch to the left to get that in. So when you're entering pictures in competitions, you need to give that some thought. The second problem I have with this image is the post-processing. The greens in the lily pads just look a little overcooked to me, a little oversaturated and a little on the yellowish side. So it's a really nice idea, but a little bit lacking in the execution. I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay, our next image is Christmas star convergence.
I certainly like the Christmas star. And I remember reading about this convergence. Unfortunately, we had too much cloud cover here when it was around. And of course, we're not all that far from New York City, so we have too much ambient light. In any event, putting that much aside, the star itself is very nice. I just don't know that the foreground is all that interesting. It looks, first of all, a little soft, a little bit muddy to me. And in the sky, when I look at the sky, you know, I love night photography, other than the fact that I have to stay up late. I wish I could do night photography during the day. But when I look at the sky, I just don't see, other than the Christmas star convergence on the lower right, I just don't see that much star activity. I don't see the Milky Way. I don't see any big spray of stars. I could practically count the stars, which, you know, is not that good. So again, the idea is a great one, but I just don't know that this composition works. 8.
Okay, our next image is Forlorn in Cuba. Cuba, right?
Cuba, yes. You know, I'm not a portrait shooter, and I take relatively few pictures of people. It's always a question in shooting a full-length portrait as to where you do your crop. Would this crop work a little better maybe if he were cropped above the knees? I think perhaps, but that's not really my field of expertise, so I'm going to give the maker a break on that. Other than the question of where to crop the image, I like it a lot. I think it's evocative. I think that the exposure is well controlled. True, you know, it's not perfect. His face and upper body are in shadow, whereas his lower torso are in bright light, and you might really prefer it to be the opposite. But, and you know, maybe I would brighten up in post-processing his upper body and face a little bit, because really that's where you want the viewer to be looking, not down at his lower body. But that's really fairly trivial. I love the mood. I love the evocative feel of it. I love the composition with the main figure being placed just a bit off center to the left. So despite some minor flaws, I'm going to give this one a 10 based on impact and evocative.
Okay, our next image is leaf collection.
No,
No, that's not what you know.
no sunrise.
You know, I don't have that on the sheet.
No, this is the one that I was changed on the PDF I sent.
We're looking at the latest PDF that was sent. Is this,
Be Sunrise Peak.
Sunrise.
Sunrise Peak, Saguaro. Okay, so let me give this a critique. I have to say that photographing cacti in the desert is really challenging. I love that the maker attempted it. I like the lighting. I like the rim lighting that you have on the cacti. That I think is very appealing. However, I'm looking for something to really serve as a center of interest. And, you know, I just don't see it. What I see is a clutter of cactus. And I think that perhaps if the maker had picked one cluster of these guys, maybe the three of them on the right, and just focused on a small group of them, there are just too many cacti in here to really make a coherent composition. And that's a very, very common problem when shooting this subject. And the second thing I will point out is what I usually point out as I do my border patrol. What do I see? I see a very bright cluster of rocks at the bottom at the edge that is attracting my eye. I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay, I believe this is our last image in the F11, and the title is South Rim. No, that's the leaves.
Leaf collection.
Leaf collection, okay.
Okay. It looks more like a leaf collection than the South Rim to me, so we will treat it as such.
Thanks.
I think that the maker saw something interesting here, an interesting pattern made by the leaves forming a V in the middle around what looks like a little pool of water. So I like the idea very much. I think that there's some problems with the execution. As I look at it, you have a couple of areas that attract my eye in the upper left and in the lower left corner that are prominent, but out of focus and soft. And I think they're a little bright. They're not as bright as the main area of leaves, but they're bright enough and saturated enough that they really attract my interest. And you don't want my interest to be attracted to something quite that out of focus. Again, I think the maker tried to get a little too much in this image. I might have focused on just, say, a cluster of leaves right in the center where it forms that V and worked on that. In a lot of these images, less is more. And you need to remember to just focus your attention on what you want the viewer to see and nothing else. So I'm giving this one an 8.
And hopefully this is South Rim?
Yes.
That looks like a South Rim to me. Beautiful, very dramatic rock structures. I mean, how can you go wrong with the Grand Canyon? I think having I'm assuming that's the Colorado River in the middle, adds, it attracts my eye, and I think that works well. I do think, however, that your tonal range is pretty limited. It's all kind of dark and a little bit muddy. I would have worked on bringing out a little more detail to give it a little more tonal range in the rock itself. And I don't think the light is helping you. It looks like it's fairly close to midday. Your shadows are very intense, and it looks like you're kind of shooting into the sun a bit. So you're getting these very deep shadows on the rock faces that are facing you. It would have worked much better if you waited until the sun was coming from behind you and lighting up the rock faces. I'll give this an 8.
And Bob, according to my notes, that completes F11?
That does, yes it does.
Excuse me, this is Victoria Ashby, and I'm in F11. I submitted 2 photographs. I was told that you received them.
That's possible.
It looks like they may be in F16.
Okay,
Yeah.
remember, I'm F11.
Well, if they're in F16, you're running with the big dogs now.
Yes, they are. I think they are. Did you say Victoria Ashby?
Yes.
Yeah, I just, Relics was one.
Yes.
And I'm looking for the other. Yep, and what remains
Yeah,
is.
yeah, they're both there.
They're
Yes.
both.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you
If-
want to
if-
fish them out, Bob, or did you want to include them in the F-16s?
That's not gonna go.
Bob?
Yeah,
Yeah, did you want to project those, or do you want to just run them through when you run the F-16s?
we'll go through when we get to F16.
Okay,
These are the 5-star winners.
okay. All right, so of the with the exception of Victoria, we had 4 10s in the F11 category, and they are Organized Chaos, Al Shinogo.
Well,
I'm
no,
sorry. I'm sorry. My
That's
mistake.
no, this one's Sprague
Yeah.
Lake
Great
trifecta
Lake Trifecta.
by Sean Slade.
That was by, and I think Sean's gone, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but he does have some notes here. I'll just read his notes.
Sure, go ahead.
He said, from left to right are Otis Mountain, Pallet Peak, and Flat Top Mountain, the scene from Sprague Lake. This day, the wind was freezing and whipping the snow off the peaks. I thought black and white would better represent the scene versus color. So that's Sean. Okay.
Got it. The next one was Line of Geese. And I think that was yours, Cliff.
Yep, that was mine. So that's just out of Bar Lake. I went out there to see the eagles, and I saw the eagles. They're quarter mile out on the lake, but the geese are just flying all over. I don't know. I just like this view up against the mountains. And post-processing wise, the only thing I really did was I did brighten up the bottom a little bit, just to balance the exposure. And then there were so many geese that there was no cropping that would not cut geese on the border. So I did clone out some half butchered geese on the very border. So that was it.
Okay, thank you.
Nice job.
Very nice job. Our next 10 is Stockyard Melancholy by Joe Razes. Is Joe available?
There's no notes on this from Joe.
Okay.
Oh, is Joe on? No, okay.
I thought Joe was in attendance.
And our last 10 in this category is Forlorn in Cuba by Bill Dixon.
Yes, this was, I was on a tour of a sugarcane factory in Trinidad, Cuba, and visiting this farm. And I was able to translate with this gentleman, and he makes $64 a month through the government, but the government pays for his house, which is a really run-down shack. And he really wouldn't smile, and really I can see why he wouldn't smile. But it was just a fantastic photo opportunity, and I was able to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, nice work.
Where are we now? Okay, that is it for the F11, so we're going to head off into the F16s. And again, we'll start off with the black and whites. And the first one is Looking Out Over London.
Must have been a foggy day.
Yeah.
Change your filter, Bob. You filtered to specific scores.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Again, Looking Out Over London.
There we go. Well, it's a really dramatic image. Beautifully captured. Wonderful, wonderful angle. You know, might I have toned down some of the bright areas in the sky to just below and to the left of that ball with the people in it a little bit? Yeah, perhaps, but that's such a nit. It is really very dramatic. The geometry is interesting. Other than that little bright area of the sky, you have a really nice range of tones. 10.
Okay, our next image, also black and white, is Forest Twilight.
I think the maker intentionally created silhouettes here, and I think the silhouettes work well in black and white. However, I'm troubled by, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to look at. You know, and again, this is a matter of personal taste, but I like images and I respond better to images that have a clear center of interest. And as I look around, it's mostly a jumble. And I think this is another situation where less would be more. And I think if you picked out, for example, just that small cluster of branches in the middle, as I look counting from the right, it's one to the third one in, and counting from the left, it's just the one to the right of that big, thick one. That would make a nice focus and a nice silhouette just by itself. But with all of these, I don't really know which one to look at. And when I look at the big, thick one, in fact, I see it's cut off on the top, it's clipped on the left. So it's a great idea, but I just don't think it works that well in this particular presentation. 8.
Okay, next black and white is Perturbed.
Well, he does look a little perturbed. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that roar. You know, it's an unusual choice to put a lion in black and white. You see most nature photography, Ansel Adams aside, in color, especially wildlife photography. But I think it works well here. You know, he's certainly the brightest area. My eye goes directly to his face and his mouth. The rest of the area is nice and dark. The only criticism I might have is it looks like it was taken with a flash. And, you know, it has that kind of flashed look as I look at the shadows, the shadow of the tooth on his mane toward the right side of his face, the shadow of the front of his mane on the back of his mane. It just has that flash look. And I think if you're going to flash it, it works better if you soften your flash, either with a diffuser or by toning it down a couple of f-stops, maybe taking it down, you know, compensating your flash down to f1.5 or f2. I'll give this one a 9. With a better flash, I would have given it a 10.
The next black and white is Industrial Complexity.
I think this is a very strong image. You know, it's very dynamic in the ways that the lines are all converging, and it has impact. It has interest. It engages me, and even though it's not entirely clear what the center of interest is, those curving lines going through the middle and the curving line below it are so powerful that they kind of act as a center of interest. It looks like they might be railroad tracks that you're shooting up on. Very dramatic. The black and white works well here to focus on just the intersecting forms. 10.
Our next is Burnt Eucalyptus Forest.
You know, I have mixed feelings about this one. On the one hand, I think the maker saw something interesting, and the conversion to black and white is engaging. I particularly like the waving lines of the grasses converted to black and white. On the other hand, my eye just kind of wanders around this picture, and you know, I suppose you could say that on the one hand, that area just above the middle that's brighter acts as the center of interest. But on the other hand, then my eye goes back to this area in the foreground that has very high contrast. It also acts as a center of interest because actually that has more detail and it's sharper. So I'm just not quite sure what to look at. I think if there were something in this image to act as an anchor, a bush in the foreground, it would be a much stronger image. I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay, our next black and white is Iron Maiden.
Well, somebody had a little fun in Photoshop here. I forget which is the filter that creates this effect. And you know, I'm not a fan of adding filters just for filter's sake. But I think in this case, it works reasonably well. The black and white conversion works well. And the geometry, the contrast of the kind of rectilinear geometry of the, looks like a covered bridge of some kind, contrasts nicely with the swooping swirls that have been added by post-processing. So even though in general I'm not a favor of adding these post-processing images, in this particular case, I think it works very well. And I'm giving this one a 10.
The first one in.
It's a nice portrait. I think that the vignette works well here. Vignette, I think I might have vignetted it just a little bit less. You know, the vignette here is obvious, and my taste goes toward vignettes that are subtle, not quite so obvious, but nonetheless, I think it works pretty well here. And the areas that you want the eye to go to, that you want the viewer to look at, are clearly the sharpest and the brightest. You maintain detail well, I think, in the bright areas and in the dark areas that are in the center of the image. Works very nicely, 10.
That's it for the black and white. So into the color. Social distancing, Nashville, June 2020.
Well, you know, there's a lot going on in this image, and there might be a little too much going on in it for me. I'm trying to look at where I might focus on. But, you know, on the other hand, having a lot going on is what this scene is all about. I just wish that I'm just trying to decide if it would be a little bit stronger if some of those signs on the side were toned down just a little bit so that I know that they're there, but they don't draw my eye away from the center of the image, which is where all the traffic is. Matter of personal taste. If the maker wants, he or she can perhaps experiment with that. I'm going to give this one a 9.
The next image is a welcoming smile.
The woman herself, I think, is beautifully captured. Nice detail in the face. It's well lit. It looks like, you know, she's framed nicely in the doorway. I'm not going to give it a 10 because I find some of the foliage in front of her and to the right of the image in the foreground, just a little bright, a little soft, and a little distracting. And I might have, at the very least, darkened that, maybe used a little bit of a vignette to not make it as prominent in the image. And I also think that this image might have been stronger with the foliage on the left-hand side cropped out. I'm just not sure that the foliage adds to the image in any way. But the woman herself is beautifully captured and nicely framed. I'll give this one a 9 as well.
Thanks, Phil. Our next image is fall entrance.
I love the leading lines of the path. I love the placement of the human figure. You know, they say you shouldn't shoot people from the back, but I think this works fine, of the human figure walking away toward the bright area. The post-processing for me is just a little too intense. The leaves are a little oversaturated. The trees are, you know, it's just, you know, it's just a little too over the top. I think it for me, it would be better if it were just toned down, a little more subtle. I don't think you need to, you know, with this image, the geometry of it, of the trees and the leading line is strong enough that you just don't need that really intense contrast, the sharpening, the kind of over the intense saturation of the leaves. This one gets an 8.
Our next image is Scottish Pride.
Well, it's a well-posed portrait. The only thing he's missing is his bagpipe. I think that the lighting is good. The background looks very professional. And, you know, with the kind of soft but somewhat varied browns. The contrast is well controlled. He's got that determined Scottish look. I'll give this one a 10.
Our next image is Footprint in the Sand.
Well, it has a clearly defined center of interest. You can't ask for a clearer center of interest than that, the footprint. I think the lighting is interesting. You have some side lighting on it, and footprints, whether they're in the sand or the snow, tend to show up best with some side lighting. I'm struggling a bit here because, you know, as a competition, I want an image to have some interest or some impact. And this seems to me to be just more of a documentary shot, a documentary or record shot of a footprint that just, you know, I'm not sure what the story is, what the narrative is. It's just lacking in impact for me. And I know that's somewhat subjective, but, you know, when I look at impact, it has to be somewhat subjective. I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay, our next image is Relics.
Oh, relics. So this is the F11. I'll try and be a little more lenient with this then. I like the I like the subject very much, especially the one that's fully in the picture, the one on the right side of the picture. I think that's very well handled. The exposure is good. It's clear what the center of interest is. I'm troubled by the half panel on the left. I really think that if you're going to put something like this panel in, it should either be all in or all out. I don't know that, you want every element of your image to add to the image. And I think if the panel on the left that's clipped in half were fully in, it would add to the narrative. If it were completely out, then you wouldn't have to worry about it. Then you would just focus on the panel on the right. But the fact that it's half in is, to me, a distraction. I'm giving this one I'm bearing in mind that it's F11. For an F11, I'll give it a 9.
Okay, our next image is low tide.
Now, by the way, if you want to point out where the other F11 is when it comes in, that
I
would
will.
be fine. Okay, great. It's nice and sharp. I think that the center of interest is the island in the middle. It's an unusual structure, natural structure in this case. The sky holds some interest. It's not all that dramatic, but it does hold some interest. I might have darkened the bright areas in the sky and even in the water a little bit. You want my eye to really be drawn to the island. And I'm seeing a differentiation. There should be no differentiating when scoring F11 or F16. Well, I'm the judge, so I'll be the judge of that. I would darken the water just a tad. I want my eye, the viewer's eye, going primarily to the island and not so much. Thank you, Todd, but I'm still the judge and I'll be the judge of that. You can decide not to have me back if you like. So back to this image. I would darken the sky a little bit and darken the water, and that way my eye would rest more on the island in the middle. But other than that, I think it's nicely composed. It's nice and sharp. I think the tones are well maintained. I'll give this one a 9.
Our next image is family time.
Well, it's dramatic. The sky is certainly dramatic. I'm not quite sure what's happening. Again, I think if you're going to do some over-the-top post-processing, you need to have a very good reason for doing so. And I just don't think this one works. I think that the saturation in the sky is way over the top. There's some kind of post-processing, even on the ground in the background underneath those really intense clouds. It just looks like it's overcooked to me. And I think that it was unnecessary. It looks like the scene itself was so dramatic that it was unnecessary. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Our next image is red hollyhock.
I'm sorry, what was the score in this one?
This was an 8.
Red hollyhock?
Red hollyhock, okay. I love the placement of the flower itself, up in one of those rule of third points that I'm sure you all know about, where images can look a little more dramatic. I think that there are some problems with the image. I think that the bright areas are just a little too bright and taking my, of the white areas below that main part of the flower are just a little too bright and taking my eye away from where you want me to be looking, which is in the upper left at that red, beautiful red flower. I'm just wondering if you even needed all of that, all of the stem and those buds below it. I might have cropped some of those out. I just don't know that all of them add to the image, and I probably would have toned them down as well. The light here looks just a bit harsh. 8.
Red-tailed hawk.
Well, let's put aside the fact that I don't believe it's a red tail. It's a different hawk species, but putting that aside, that's really irrelevant. It's not a birding competition. The pose is beautiful. I love the profile on the face. I think the lighting is nicely done. It's well lit with the light coming pretty much from over the photographer's shoulder. I'm looking at the face and the eye. And in fact, I'm looking at the bird itself, and I'm just not sure if it's 100% sharp. I'm looking at some of the feather detail, and to my eye, it just looks a touch soft. It's beautifully done other than that, and if I'm incorrect on that, I apologize, but to me, that's taking it down from a 10 to a 9, so I'm giving it a 9.
Abstract arrangement.
Well, it's an interesting pattern. Again, I guess it looks to me, okay, I see what it is. It's flowers in a vase, and it's perhaps shot through some kind of frosted window or with some kind of filter on it that mimics that effect. It's interesting. And it certainly engages my brain a little bit. It took me a little bit of time to figure it out. I think I would have cropped it in. The pattern itself holds some interest, but your real focus are those flowers in the vase that then have that pattern on top of them. And I just don't know that having all of that pattern around, whether it's a window or a filter put on, I'm not really sure, helps it and adds to it. I might have cropped that in, and I think it would have been a stronger composition. I'm giving this one an 8.
Overflow parking lot.
I think it's a very interesting composition, and even though I think you have 2 subjects, really, there's something in the upper right. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's so unclear and so dim as to not even attract my eye much. But the car and the church are really 2 subjects, and of course they say you shouldn't have even numbers, but that's never been a rule that made much sense to me. I think here it works well. It kind of puts that old car in context, and the context works nicely. 2 things I think might have improved this image. It just looks a little bit flat, and I think you want the car especially to pop a little more. Yeah, you could have left the church as a little bit underexposed, but I would have brightened up that car a little bit and given it a little more pop. And I also don't know that the area to the right of the image, all that grass and stuff in the background, adds to the image. I think it would have been stronger if that had been cropped out. The real interest in this image is from the car and up to the left. I'm giving, the idea is wonderful. I think the execution, both in composition and pose, could have been a little stronger. I'm giving this one a 9.
This is an F11. It is What Remains.
Well, this I think is pretty nicely done. I think even if it were even if it were an F16, it would be pretty nicely done. The only things I think that could be done to strengthen this image are really similar to my critique of the last image. That big expanse of wall on the right, to the right of the to the archway, I don't know adds to the composition at all, because your real interest is in the center of the image. To the left, at least, you have more interest because there's a corner there, and that has some interest as well. So 2 things I think would have improved this. I think cropping in from the right, number 1, and getting a little more detail in post-processing in those clouds. You know, if you're shooting in RAW, as I hope you should be, to, in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, to bring down the highlights and whites a bit, use the texture slider, maybe in a brush, to bring out some detail in those clouds. I'll give this one a 9.
Winter in the Garden.
Winter maybe in the rock garden. It looks like you're photographing up against a cliff in the southwest. It's an interesting background, an interesting context. As far as a composition, though, my eye and my brain really want to see the entire tree. I just don't know that shooting the upper part of the tree works in this case. I think it would have been stronger done one of 2 ways. Either number 1, getting the whole tree, or whether it's 2 trees in against that background, would have been a more traditional composition, and I think that would have worked well. The other, as I look at this, would be to have gone in the opposite direction. And as I look at the lobe on the right, just to crop into that upper lobe and do a close-up of just that lobe against that background of rock would have been almost like a macro shot of the tree against that dramatic background, and I think that might have worked well. But as this composition is presented, for me, it just doesn't have the impact that I would want, and I'm going to give this one an 8.
The Lake Union Station.
I love the center and the upper part of this composition. I love the reflection. I think it was well captured. This is not an easy shot to get with this range of light between really bright lights on the left-hand side, which, by the way, I might have toned down just a bit, and on the right-hand side, which I also might have toned down just a bit on those pillars. Because I think you really want the viewer to be looking to the middle and perhaps right at the top. So those bright areas I would have toned down. And again, I'm always thinking, does each element add to the image? And when I look at the bottom of the image, that big dark area on the bottom, which is 20% of your image, I just think that could have been cropped out, and I think it could have been presented without that, with the crop just below where your detail starts in the reflection, where that band of kind of semi-dark light is. It would have been strengthened there. So I think it would have been improved with that crop and with those bright pillars just toned down a bit. Otherwise, it would have been a 10, but as presented, I'm giving it a 9. It's still a very strong image.
Okay, we have 3 images left. Sunset at Devil's Tower.
sunset with longhorn cow at Devil's Tower. Um, I love Devil's Tower against the sky. I think that works very nicely. I think two things would strengthen this image. One is that I think that cow, to me, is just a distraction. It's first of all, it's very small in the image. It's 2% of the image is that cow. I think if you're going to take a shot with a cow like that, get right up on the cow, and safety permitting, and make it a foreground element that has some drama and that anchors the image. But I just don't think it works as a tiny figure on the left. So I think this image would have worked much better cropped up above the cow with just that second layer in, or perhaps cropping in from the left and keeping a little bit of the foreground, toning down the saturation. Again, remember, the brightest part, the sharpest part, and the most saturated part are what the eyes go to. And the grass, it's your foreground. You don't want the eye going to there. You want the eye going to Devil's Tower and that beautiful sky. So perhaps darkening the foreground grass a little bit, desaturating it a little bit, and cropping that cow out. Cropping just to the right of the cow, perhaps, would have worked a little better. As presented, I'll give this one an 8.
Our next to last image is winter freeze.
Well, I'm partial to ice images because here, now that I'm not traveling, what my wife and I do is we walk around our community after a good freeze and shoot ice. So I like the subject. I think the photographer controlled the contrast very well. Ice shots are not always easy to get, to maintain some detail in the whites while also maintaining detail in the dark areas. I do think that the leaf itself looks just at the leaf I'm talking about on the lower left, which is, prominent in the image, looks just a touch soft to me. And it's so prominent, I would want to see it a little sharper. Aside from that, I really like the image. When you have an image that has just a little bit of softness to it like this, and in fact, when I look at some of the ice figures, especially in the upper left, they're just a touch soft as well. You can try running it through something like Topaz Sharpen AI and seeing whether that helps. Sharpen AI and denoise AI that can really work wonders on an image like this. I'll give this one an 8.
And our last image is watery reflection.
Well, it's a very dramatic image. I'm not sure whether I'm looking at intense post-processing or whether you were just at such an unusual site that the light was really like this. My first suspicion is that it's post-processing, but I've been in some places inside a glacier in Iceland where the light is just so unusual that who knows, maybe you were in a setting like that. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt in that regard. There is a however, though, and the however, just to be consistent, is I'm going to criticize you for having the brightest areas being really at the periphery of the image. As I look, it is true you kind of have in the center right a relatively bright area that can act as a center of interest. But as I look around the left side and up on the top, it is just so bright, and in fact, so bright, in fact, that in the lower left, you really have no detail at all in the image. That I think just as presented, should you crop that out? Should you tone it down? Something should be done to make that not so intense and bright in the image. I'm giving this one an 8 as well.
Okay, Phil, thank you. That finishes up the F-16s, unless Bob, you know something that I don't.
I'll have to rate them.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 10s. And let's start with Looking Out Over London by Dan Greenberg.
Okay, well, that was taken also from another one, the same thing that you're looking at on the upper right. I was in the one right next to it, and luckily having a polarizer and shooting through, because you're shooting through glass, you know, kind of thick curved glass. And then basically, you know, otherwise just balanced it and did, you know, converted it to black and white. I forgot how at this point, but at any rate, that's it. Taken with a pretty wide angle lens, and that's all there is.
Very dramatic shot.
Thank you, Dan. Our next 10 is also Dan Greenberg. It is Industrial Complexity.
Yeah, and this one is something that a place I really love. It's at the Bethlehem Steel Plant in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which if you're somebody like me who likes rust and old things and whatever, it's like a kid in a candy store kind of effect. And there's a lot of things there that you can zoom in on and get abstracts like this. So that's kind of what this is zooming in. This was taken probably with like a 300 millimeter lens or something on a full frame camera, and zoomed in quite a bit just to get, you know, this detail shot, just because I liked all the contrasting lines and circles and, you know, whatever. So
very nicely done.
Contrast a lot on it when I processed it.
Nice job, Dan. Our next 10 is Todd Lytle's Iron Maiden.
This was taken on my kind of COVID road trip that I've shared with the group before in the month of June. This was a bridge crossing the Illinois River in, I guess, Illinois, somewhere between Missouri and Illinois, where that river runs into the Mississippi as a major tributary. Anyway, there was a whole lift section of the bridge on top, so that when big steamers or other ships come down, that raised it down. But I stood there and took photographs for a little while, and finally the guy up in the guardhouse came down and he said, "Hey, you can't take pictures of this." And I said, "Okay," and I left. But I only got a little bit of that in 28 days on the road, but there is still some general paranoia about why photographers want to stand in the middle of the road or the middle of, you know, all kinds of places that we stand to get up even perspective on an image. And people they just don't get it. So anyway, thanks.
And
For
your post-processing
that was,
on this one?
Yeah, it was. You're exactly right. It was topaz. And I have some other versions of it that I like that aren't as kind of tweaked out like that. But I thought it played all right. And I was on my computer at about 10 o'clock at night. And my office is shared with my daughter's currently visiting guest bedroom. And she said she wanted to go to bed. So I had to, I was out of time and out of money. So that's what we get.
Well, it worked in this case. It worked well, I thought.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more 10s, and both are by Cliff Lawson. This is first one in.
Yeah, this guy his stories are just jaw-dropping. He that on his hat there you see Rescue Pedro. That is that helicopter that has twin intermeshing blades the Air Force used back in the 60s. Like for airplane crashes, the blades were set so that they had an increased downwash, so the helicopter would blow the flames away from the aircraft. He wasn't a pilot. He was one of the rescue crew member. And then you see Bomb Squad there on his shirt. He was one of the first responders also to the Columbine shooting back in the 90s. He's got stories that would keep you spellbound for hours. So, and thanks for your comments on the vignette. You know, I thought it looked a little dark too. One of the handy things about doing this on Zoom, I went back to the original and it's not quite that dark. So I guess it's in the translation from that to posting it here, but
okay.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. I appreciate it.
And then Cliff, tell us about Scottish Pride.
Well, this guy showed up. I can't tell you how thrilled I was when I saw what he was going to wear. Just all of that, the red cape against his navy blue tunic and his facial hair. I mean, the face, he's got character and he's just a delightful guy. That background, by the way, Phil mentioned the background. All of these backgrounds are one of a kind. They're made from different textures that I've shot over the years, different things, and I combine them with different blend modes, and everybody gets his own backdrop. No two are ever the same. So
Very nice.
if you duplicate that, I'd say, I know I can't, because I don't even know which textures I used to make it for that guy. I just made it for him. So he's got his own personal background.
Very nice. You did a nice job blending them in too.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all extracted. The new extract tool in Photoshop is magic. So yeah, it makes it a lot easier.
That is the end of the competition. Before I turn it over, next month, our competition is artificial light. Thank Cliff for this one. This category is a little different. The primary light source for any image must be artificial, i.e. it cannot be the sun, the moon, stars. And examples include, obviously flash, strobe, LED lights, street lights, building lights, and also light painted night photographs. For example, a photo of star trails would not qualify, but the star trails with the light painted foreground would. Okay, and we can read those on the website. And our next month's judge will be our good buddy, Russ Burden. So with that, does anybody have something else to add here?
Well, I thank you for having me. I hope you found the comments useful. I apologize for the little bit of conflict we had about the F11 image. But other than that, I thought it went quite smoothly, and I enjoyed the judging.
Thanks a lot, Philip.
Oz or Bob, does anybody else have anything?
Just a thank you.
Okay, take care, all of you. Butch, thanks for having me out to Colorado. It's been a nice trip.
Good to see you, Phil.
Good to
Come back
see
and
you.
see us again sometime. Thank you.
Okay, you'll be seeing my wife in a couple months. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Philip.
Thanks, Phil.